Welcome back to the Friday Detroit POD cast. We covered most of the offense after the first week of training camp. Real quick, we didn't touch O-line, but I don't think there's much there, Jeremy, because pads aren't on yet.
Yeah,
And
always.
I don't want to think about O-line until pads are on.
It's tough when there's like no one-on-one drills going on, which is really like that's the exciting time when you see the O line and the D line go at it. And so like the interior stuff on 7-on-7, or I'm sorry, 11-on-11s is really hard to see. You see a little bit of the tackle battles going on, and we already mentioned a little bit of that. But the only really interesting thing I think that we saw there was at times they've been taking Frank Ragnow out at center, not a ton, and putting Jonah Jackson there where he played a little bit towards the end of last year, just kind of cross training him, getting him ready. But the more interesting part is that it's undrafted rookie Kevin Jarvis who's come in at left guard occasionally to fill Jonah Jackson's spot. And so he's maybe someone once the pads come on to kind of keep your eye on and see if he kind of climbs up the ranks, because the interior depth is still very much up in the air. We don't know if Tommy Kramer is going to be one of those guards, Logan Stenberg, and it seems like maybe Kevin Jarvis has worked his way into that conversation as well. So just something to kind of keep an eye on.
We'll keep that in mind. Let's move over to the defense. Early thoughts on the defense. So we talked about this, I think, last Scraps episode about there's a podcast where Aaron Glenn talked about kind of in a very funny way. I think we kind of alluded to it as like going to see the master up on the mountain, talking with longtime football coach Al Groh. They go over to his house and spend like 3 days just talking about football. Al Groh, almost 60 years of experience coaching defenses across both college and the NFL, went all around the Atlantic Coast Conference in college, and just was a very big philosopher about, going on the attacking offenses, even when the offense has all the advantage. And I think we're seeing that in camp right now, Jeremy, because there is pressure all over from the defense. They are practicing how to pressure.
Yeah, it would be, you wouldn't recognize this as the team that finished like 28th in sacks last year. They've been getting to the quarterback a lot. And if you look at Eric and I's top 10 standouts from week 1, I think 5 of them are defensive linemen, maybe even 6. And that just kind of goes to show you, like, they've heavily invested in this position, and they don't even have Romeo Okwara. They don't even have Josh Pascal, and they're still getting to the quarterback. And I think some of that is schematic changes. I think some of it is showing, and we can just jump right into the edges here if we want. I know it's jumping around a little bit, but Charles Harris is showing that last year was not a fluke. He's looking like that dude, like almost edge one dude. Like I'm kind of really excited for Charles Harris, and we've mentioned it before in the past. Like, he had a really, really good underrated year last year, but he also saw a ridiculous amount of double teams, which he's not going to see as much this year. So I think that the arrow is still trending up for Charles Harris. And then, I mean, do we want to just take the entire second segment and talk about how excited we are for Aiden Hutchinson? Like, that dude is wrecking people, and there are occasionally the mental mistakes. He'll get caught up on maybe a rollout and lose the edge here and there, but when it's just one-on-one, that guy is going to win a lot of battles and make a lot of opposing quarterbacks life a living hell in the backfield there. So I mean, I don't want to get too excited before the pads come on, because again, like, the offense loses a lot of tools when they can't hit back as much, but this is also a little bit about technique, right? And if your guys are dipping below or speeding past offensive tackles, well, that sort of stuff is going to translate when the pads come on too. So I don't know. Are you guys trying to temper your expectations too? Or are you like, let's go, this team is going to finish top 10 in sacks now?
I'm not there on top 10 in sacks. You've got a lot before you have to buy me on
sure.
this. You're gonna have to. I still think this is probably bottom 5 on defense. Like, I appreciate the pressure. I just think, though, the aggressiveness is probably going to burn them at some point. But again, we'll see when the pads come on. What do you think, Ryan?
I think that for Detroit, at least in the short term, I think that they're going to benefit more from having Aiden Hutchinson inside next to Charles Harris. I think that's going to be one surefire way for them to get Charles Harris in more one-on-one situations, because he's got somebody like, Hutch next to him. So it's interesting. Like I think a lot of people would prefer to see, and myself included, like I'd love to see Hutch on the outside, but when it comes to generating pressure and putting, teams into situations they don't want to be in, I think kicking Hutch into 3-tech next to Charles Harris might be one of the best looks I have. And I know Jeremy mentioned, Julian Okwara on the other side of that. The one thing that I'm intrigued by the edge competition, though, is how much it bleeds into the linebacker competition too.
Sure.
Right. Like I think that's a really interesting wrinkle because those guys are kind of hybrid players. So it's like you almost want to like lump all those guys into like your Julian Okwara, your Austin Bryan, your Jared Davis, your James Houston. Like you want to take all those guys in a pot and be like, okay, where do all these pieces fit?
That's fascinating too, because like, especially on linebackers, I do want to get back to an edge that I noticed, but real quick, since we're on linebacker real quick, is one of the guys talking about where they fit. Cause I came into camp thinking that Jared Davis probably is going to get on this roster just because of his attitude, because of what he's doing and his ability to do pretty much everything and buy in, but very little to no use on the edge so far. He's kind of repping with later offenses. So I don't know if I want to read into it too much. We've seen guys who have repped with later units who end up making the roster all the time, but it kind of tempered my expectations on Jared Davis. But I wanted to take it to, if you don't mind, if I put a pin in that, we'll come back to linebackers in a second. But
sure.
Before we moved away from edge, I wanted to talk about Austin Bryant, because I think, you mentioned the standouts, Jeremy. I thought that's a name that I thought really improved his stock this week. I think he's shown a lot. And I think with the Josh Pascal injury and surgery, that it's got room for a guy like Austin Bryant on the roster now.
Well, he's one of those guys that I think we said in our preview, like with Josh Pascal likely being out for a little bit, he's going to have an opportunity here to prove himself because they fill not identical roles, but they fill edge roles essentially. And yeah, I thought Austin Bryant had a fantastic first week. And listen, we have to temper expectations a little bit here because a lot of those times the Lions were fielding 2 undrafted guys at tackle. And so Austin Bryant is going up against the likes of Opina Eze and Dan Skipper was on the NFI. Taylor Decker is missing some time here and there as maintenance day, probably foot related, but not a long-term concern. So he's not going against great competition, but he's doing what you're supposed to do when you're going against so competition. You're saying, oh, I'm way better than this. And that's what Austin Bryant is doing. So I think he's worked his way back into the conversation. Julian Okwara is in that same conversation, and I thought he had a good start to the week, but he kind of tailed off a little bit. And I think maybe the most telling thing about Julian Okwara is that when, Dan, I think what Dan Campbell says in front of a podium is sometimes extremely telling because he'll gush over a guy. He'll give a guy 10 nicknames, and you're like, it's a good sign for that guy. He's making an impression. When he was asked about Julian, he's like, yeah, well, he's doing a lot of the stuff that we saw last year with the pass rush, and, he's got some of the athleticism to drop into coverage to be, the dual guy that drop into coverage linebacker or the pass rushing edge guy. But we need to see more. And so he turned into that mode that you see him talk about some players where like he's clearly offering a challenge to that guy because he's not seeing enough out of him. And so he's offering a challenge to Julian, like, you got to show me more. You got to show you can set the edge. You got to show you're a little bit more versatile than just like a one-tone pass rusher. You have to add more to your game. And so I'm not saying Julian Okwara is in danger of missing the roster at this point, but he is, I feel like, on notice right now. And with Austin Bryant making an impression, I don't know. I'm not swapping those two yet on my depth chart, but I'm not. I think they have edged closer to each other. And then if I could talk about Jared Davis for a minute, I kind of am reading a lot into that situation because I don't know. We saw it with James Houston in rookie minicamp and regular minicamp, and yes, he's a rookie. It's a little bit different, but like it's like the reverse James Houston, where James Houston, they're like, sorry, dude, you're not playing linebacker. You're just going to be an edge rusher. With Jared Davis, it seems like they've done the opposite. They said, listen, we didn't see it with the edge rushers, I guess, in the spring, so you're an off-ball linebacker now, and get in line because there's 8 dudes in that competition, and right now he's repping with the 3s. And so, like you said, that can change in terms of where he's repping. But in terms of position, I think he's now just an off-ball linebacker, and I'm pretty surprised by that because I think me and a lot of Lions fans are kind of excited to see him being more of an edge role, and I don't know if that's disappeared completely at this point. It kind of feels like it has.
Just let him put the pads on, man. He'll be a dog chasing cars.
He will. I'm excited. Is that the guy you're most excited to see when you get the pads on, or is it? I mean, well, outside of Aiden Hutchinson, I should say.
I guess if I was a serious masochist as a Lions fan, for sure, it would be seeing Jared Davis's renaissance in Detroit.
Hutchinson's gonna blow up, right? I'm saying that I'm trying to temper the Kool-Aid as much as possible, but again, we keep not talking about Hutchinson, and very soon Hutchinson is going to make us talk about him. And I get why we're not talking about him, because there was so much in the draft where it's deeper stuff, questions, pretty things, and depth considerations for guys like Pascal and Houston and JMO's electricity and injury. But Hutchinson it was we got him. And then it's oh, hey, yeah, this guy is going to start sacking people.
How many years have we just begged for a star on this defense? There hasn't.
How many
been
years
a
have I
star.
been begging for a damn pass rush?
There hasn't been anyone.
Yeah.
When's the last time there was a Pro Bowl guy here on defense? Glover Quinn,
Darius
Slay. And on the defense, in the front seven, you have to go all the way back to Sue days, right?
Yeah, you get 2014.
Yeah.
You want to talk about I want to talk about the backfield a little bit. Will Harris.
Maybe the storyline of week one.
I know I know you are the cheerleader prime for Jeff Okuda, but from everything you've seen at camp, and I'll kick this to Ryan too as well. Is there any chance Will Harris, who we've taken our shots at Will Harris, but that's all been when he was at safety. He looks vastly improved as a cornerback. And I am now here to ask you, and I'm asking you to think about this deeply. I'm asking you to think about this without the pom-poms for your club. Is there a chance Will Harris can, I'm not saying he's done it right now, but throughout this camp, throughout preseason, jump Jeff Okuda as the cornerback who will start opposite of Amani or Warrior come week one?
I mean, unequivocally, the answer is yes. And I don't even know if I would consider it a jump at this point. I think he's,
wow.
I mean, if you were to tally up the reps right now, I would say Will Harris has been getting more first team reps than Jeff Okuda. It's not lopsided, but I think that's where it stands right now. I think Jeff Okuda needs to work his way onto the starting lineup. And I know that's going to cause consternation by some people and be like, oh God, Will Harris is playing Jeff Okuda, we're screwed.
Yeah, I don't know how I can't take that as anything but a bad sign for Jeff Okuda's recovery.
But that's not really what's happening. Neither of them are playing particularly poorly. I think both of them are actually playing particularly well. They're both making plays. It's almost like a good situation to have. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you wow, the Lions have two cornerback ones on their roster and they have to figure out which one's which. That's not the situation we're at. But I don't think one is way outplaying the other, and I don't think one is bogging. One is not. I think they're just winning the job rather than Jeff Okuda is losing the job, if that makes sense. And also, pads haven't come on. Let's wait till all that. One-on-ones. We haven't seen any one-on-ones yet. That's really when we're going to see some of this stuff separate each other. It's when we're going to see more from the wide receivers, where we're going to see more from the defensive backs. When they do those one-on-ones, that's going to be really eye-opening. I think that's where we'll start having more opinions on the secondary. But right now, I think Will Harris is doing a bang-up job at corner, and that, take Jeff Okuda out of the question for a second. That's good news, because who is the backup outside cornerback right now? If Jeff Okuda was to start, and I were to tell you 3 weeks ago, hey, Will Harris is your backup outside corner, you'd be like, run for the hills, man, right? And now you should feel a little bit better about that situation. That's my take out of the first week.
Yeah, that just seems a little bit wild to me, though, that 3 weeks ago you would be Chicken Little assuming that the sky is falling. And then now just over the course of 3 weeks, you feel comfortable I'm on board with Will Harris.
Better.
Yeah, because to say that like some people have taken shots at Will Harris, like that guy, he has been the punching bag of the defense for the past 2 years.
He was the GOAT, and I'm not saying that as like capital letters. I'm saying that lowercase GOAT, as in sacrificial.
Yeah,
Scape.
like if Will Harris goes out and like shows that, hey, I'm supposed to be an outside cornerback and I've just been being misused all this time, it's going to take like an entire training camp, and it's going to take some, games in the preseason. And to be honest, it's going to take some convincing in season if he ends up winning that cornerback 2 job. Like, I just think that like for it to happen that quickly over 3 weeks, like it just seems like all of this Jeff Okuda hype, and then it's like, hey, guess what? Will Harris is playing pretty well. It's like, okay, but what about Jeff Okuda? Well, he's just not playing as well. It's like, shit.
You're not wrong. There's definitely some of that going on, but I think it's also worth remembering. Will Harris slipped in last year. Like, he was the nickel corner for 3 games when AJ Parker was out, and then he slipped to outside corner. And you look at the production there, it wasn't bad. He played the position actually quite well. Like, again, I'm not talking CB1 numbers. I'm not talking lockdown numbers, but a guy that's coming in there and playing like a cornerback that doesn't make you rip your hair out. we'll take that out of a CB2 right now.
But I think I know where Ryan's coming from, because like I don't know how anyone can look at this from an outside perspective without a massive amount of nuance and take it as a positive, especially in the case of Jeff Okuda, because no matter what happens, it's going to be like Okuda is losing out to Will Harris. That's the takeaway. But I know it's not fair, Jeremy.
It's definitely not fair.
It's not fair.
Because
but I'm saying how it's going to be perceived.
The other part of this equation too is like Okuda's coming back from an Achilles injury. They weren't just going to give him first team reps right away and just like, sorry, like you're getting the full load right away. Like that's not how that was ever going to work.
That's yes. I think that's the easiest retort to those people, is that Okuda's just probably not getting the full amount of work. I'm not saying he's lost out completely, but like right now it is, to Ryan's point, it's warning flags to people in the Detroit sports media who are going to read into it.
It's just this competition's far from over too. Right. Like
sure.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still so much of this, to shake itself out. But I think we should talk about the safeties.
Yes, let's talk about the safeties.
One really quick line that I want. If Will Harris is the week 1 starter, Aaron Glenn might not make it through the season. Like he might get hired as a head coach mid-season. That never happens. Never has happened, but it might be a first. If he can make Will Harris a starting corner, like a starting quality, like I don't know who's a bad coach out there right now. Is Joe Judge still a coach?
You're drinking the Kool-Aid a little too hard.
New York is going to trade for Aaron Glenn at the deadline.
You're drinking the Kool-Aid too hard right now.
It's training camp season. What am I supposed to be doing?
That's getting into a very specific DNA of Lions, being like, oh my God, we might be too good that people are going to suddenly show an interest in Lions coaches, which they have never done.
They did it last offseason, Chris.
I know, but you just think it's going to go in overdrive. But anyway,
yeah, the thing that I think we can transition from here, though, and the thing that threads together the defensive backfield is finding spots for where players will best suit this defense. And apparently it's Will Harris playing outside corner, and it's somebody who they kind of thought would be like that outside corner depth in Iffy making the full-time transition to safety. Like all of a sudden that room gets really interesting, knowing that like he's going to be a safety and not a cornerback. Cause it's like, all right, you drafted Kirby Joseph though in the 3rd round.
Right.
And Kirby's kind of coming along a little slowly right now. But so again, early, but
right.
Yeah.
It's 2 guys relatively new to the position, or relatively new to the NFL position, I guess is the best way to put it. And listen, like Juju Hughes is repping above both those guys right now. And CJ Moore is probably about to come back from PUP or NFI or whichever one he's on. And so, yeah, I think it's super interesting. Like, I keep saying it. Like, I don't know if he fits right now. And we keep saying he's a situational guy, but like he has to do more than that. And they are getting him in on special teams. And so there could be a role for him there, but they got to they got to validate his spot on the roster. Like I don't want to hit the panic button 1 week into training camp, but it's tough to see him being first of all, living up to his draft status. Like, I don't know if there's a path for him to be a starter at any point. Like, that seems drastic, but it's just, he seems like a weird fit because like you said, like, it just, for whatever reason, it didn't work out at corner last year. They're pushing him to safety, but like, they already got guys that they like there. So I don't know. I don't know what the plan is there. It's an interesting situation.
So what Jeremy's saying is he can't tell if he's a safety or if he's a corner.
And with that, we are going to our break because I cannot tolerate any more of that. You were waiting all podcasts to do that, Ryan, weren't you?
I hated the joke, but I love that it got us off this segment before we had time to talk kickers.
Austin Seibert missed a couple. I don't know what else there is to say.